Well, I just finished reading HESIOD Works and Days and Theogony, and let me tell you, I was pleasantly surprised, but I was doubly surprised for just one little tiny aspect of Hesiod, which moderns might call now misogyny. Some people might say I'm overstating the problem, but it seems to me that Hesiod either has knowledge into secrets with the gods that we have since lost, or Hesiod might have had some bad relationships with women. The truth as it is, I think, lies somewhere in the middle. Let me show you what I mean with a part of the Pandora myth, which is the myth of the making of woman. Basically, Adam and Eve. This is Eve we're talking about here. But in this myth, woman is made as a punishment on man, on Prometheus, for stealing the fire. As Zeus says, as the price of fire, I will give them an evil. And so in the making of woman, Hermes comes along and it goes like this. But into her heart, Hermes, the guide, the slayer of Argos, put lies and wheedling words of falsehood, and a treacherous nature made her as Zeus of the deep thunder wished, and he, the god's herald, put a voice inside her and gave her the name of woman, Pandora, because all the gods who have their homes on Olympus had given her each a gift, to be a sorrow to men who eat bread. Hesiod was a subpar Chad, not because he said women were bad, but because he stopped there and didn't declare, because a girl is as bad as a lad. And this gets to the crux of the problem, I think. Some of the lines in Hesiod are a little misogynistic, not because what he says about women are false, maybe some of it is, but because he doesn't give equality to the badness of men. As Shakespeare says, all men are bad and in their badness reign. Because it's like this, if I say humans are evil, everyone nods in agreement. They're like, yeah, sure. But if I say women are evil, everyone shouts and disagrees. But if I say man or woman, hell, we're all evil, everyone takes a minute, then enthusiastically nods in agreement. Because goodness is so extraordinarily hard, and to point at an arbitrary group of people and say that they're failing at being good without pointing at oneself is kind of cringe, I think. Anyway, with that matter aside, what did I think of Hesiod's book? This shit was pretty good, man. To a point. Well, let's not go too far. Works and Days was so much better than I could have ever expected. Theogony was exactly as I expected it to be. It was a genealogy of gods and some stories interspliced between it. And translation, Richmond Lattimore, the GOAT, I guess to some, not to me. Yeah, my guy, his translation was good, but it wasn't, didn't have the sizzle as usual. I feel safe in his hands, but I don't feel seduced in his hands. I want that Anne Carson translation. Boy, come on now. Anyway, how easy is this book? 0 out of 5. This is going to be the easiest ancient Greek text we have. Theogony is easy as well. It's a list of gods with stories. Voila. But what I've always hated about Works and Days is its bloody title. Its title has put me off it for so many years, just because it sounds so dreary and boring. Works and Days, but I guess the title Theogony is a little bit better. It's straight to the point, utilitarian, says what it is. So together, whatever, man, 1 out of 5. Now, of course, I'm being unfair on Hesiod, because since there was no market sector of Greek economy dedicated to publishing, there was no commercial incentive for making outrageous names to sell books. But I love outrageous names, man. So what is Works and Days and Theogony? Well, the Works and Days is what they call a farmer's almanac. Now, I'm not really sure what that is, but it's, how to be a good farmer, with lots of great nuggets of advice and a wealth of wisdom. And to set this all off at the start, we have, say, the Pandora myth and the 5 Ages of Man, which both of these, when I started reading, just took me out. When I got to the Pandora myth, I had to put the book down and just take half a day to just ponder this in my mind, because one half of it was and I'm not going to use the word misogyny aspect because it gives it this ideological tinge, but this women are evil. That doesn't sound much better as well. Shit. But why did Zeus punish Prometheus for stealing the fire with the making of woman, right? Why is the price of fire women? It felt like to me this was a deep question. But on meditating on the Pandora myth, I realized that the poem always referred to the time before women, the earth was populated by the races of men. And I think this repeated mentioning of the races of men is an ancient apprehension to a time where men and women were practically indistinguishable, like apes, like chimpanzees, in which the sexual dimorphism is very moderate and visually it's very hard to tell male and female apart. The biggest difference between male and female being the child reproductive capability and the genitals. But then all of a sudden Prometheus stole the fire of knowledge, of tool making, of civilization. And then for the price of that, Zeus made woman. And in making woman, Hermes calls her Pandora, which means the all-endowed, or the one who receives all gifts, or the all-gift-giving. And this to me symbolizes the birth of human sexual dimorphism, visual sexual dimorphism at the very least. And so the quote, evil beauty of women, that also seems to enthrall all the gods after they make her. This evil beauty is unlocked by the Promethean fire of, say, consciousness for tool making and civilization. And the main point, the extra nutritional value of cooked meat. I think that's the crux here. Behind all the poetic flair, the evolutionary parallel, this is where it lies. The extra nutritional value of cooked meat, which allowed for human brains to get bigger, and so also forced women's hips to get larger to let babies' big brains be birthed into a helpless infant state for how many years it takes. And then after being hit with the Pandora myth, I kept reading. I said, okay, that's it. We can go on now and we can just groove. And then I was hit by the ages of man. And this one again, it hit me. The 5 ages of man being the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, the Heroic Age, and the Iron Age. I thought while reading that, if this is civilization at macrocosm, it is also civilization in microcosm, because what it was explaining seemed to me the at least century-long process, at least, just to take a guess out of the air, of society. Anyway, it is what it sounds like. The Golden Age is the beautiful age, everyone's fine, it's great. Then the Silver Age is the degeneration, and it says a child is a child for 100 years, and they live in violence, and they forsake the gods. And then the Bronze Age is an age of brutes and brutality and war fighting. And then the Heroic Age is a revival back to a time of glory and honor. And this Heroic Age is also the age of Achilles and the battles of Troy. And the Iron Age is the age in which Hesiod lives in, and it's the age in which we seem to be living in right now, especially. And it's funny, Hesiod started off with, I wish I was not living in this age. That's how bad it is. That's practically Works and Days. I mean, Theogony, what is there to say about Theogony? It is what it sounds like. It's a genealogy, and it has the central myths that we hear reverberate throughout Western culture all the time. Prometheus getting his liver plucked out. It's a liver, right? The big battle between Zeus and the sons and daughters of Kronos with the Titans. And what can a reader learn from the Works and Days? And I'm going to confine myself to the Works and Days and just put Theogony aside for now. But in the Works and Days, there is a wealth of wisdom. Now we'll get to some of it later, but one of the single sentences that I liked at least, was, the putter off of work is the man who wrestles with disaster. Don't put off work, do it now. And I think perfectly true, because if you're a habitual putter off of work, then you are the kind of person, it's in your character to wrestle with disaster. Because in the ancient Greek wisdom, character is fate. Who you are is what happens to you. And if you put off work, you're a man who courts disaster. And you say, come into my house. I will let you into my house and then I will deal with you. Anyway, what can a writer learn from Hesiod. You can learn how to shirk narrative for the whole part from Works and Days and Theogony and go by whim, basically. Well, not by whim. Works and Days, instead of using narrative through line, it starts with the myth, I think, because of importance. And from there, it seems to order itself by what Hesiod deems most important. And on the flip side, the Theogony, instead of having a narrative through line, it has a genealogical through line. And so we go through the genealogy, and when it takes Hesiod's whim to expand the mythos of a certain someone, then he goes for it. And voila, there we have Hesiod in a nutshell. Now, what was his style like then? Well, I'm not really sure, because Lattimore's translation, now this isn't by accident, I know, but Hesiod and Homer were very closely related, and Hesiod was a descendant, I say descendant, of Homer. But Lattimore's translation here sounds a lot like his translation of the Iliad as well. Not one-to-one, but they have their similarities. One of the big ones being that it's written mainly in hexameter/heptameter, which is 6 beats per line or 7 beats per line, and it's got the signature Lattimore looseness about it, where, you know, he's determined to have 2 light beats between every beat, and I don't jive with that, man. It's just, I can't do it. And I'm also convinced that, you know, you really do have to read the ancient Greek if you want the aesthetic experience for Hesiod, because in my experience of reading Hesiod right now, I didn't really get an aesthetic experience. It was kind of more like an experience of acquiring knowledge. And for that reason, I'm not jealous at all of these poems. It's a 0 out of 5 for me, man. I felt nothing. And deep down for me, the way I judge if a work is good or not is if I feel jealous for it. But even with all that said, here is a moment of beauty, of genuine beauty. And I think this is one of the pearls of the Works and Days, of Lattimore's Works and Days at least. Neighbors come as they are to help. Relatives dress first. A bad neighbor's as great a pain as a good one's a blessing. One lucky enough to draw a good neighbor draws a great prize. And a little further on. No greedy profits. Greedy profit is a kind of madness. Be a friend to your friend and come to him who comes to you. Give to him who gives. Do not give to him who does not give. We give to the generous man. None gives to him who is stingy. Give is a good girl, but grab is a bad one. What she gives is death. Now, these are some of the tightest lines I think Lattimore has in the Works and Days. Especially, I mean, give is a good girl, but grab is a bad one. What she gives is death. You know, this almost feels biblical, as if it could be, say, a part of the Old Testament. And maybe that's what Lattimore was going for. I'm not sure. And from a stylistic perspective, the way of making verbs like give and grab and personifying them just by using their words as, say, names. That's the playfulness I love. Not just because it's playful, but also it hammers home the point in a way we have yet to hear before. It's sparkling and new. Now here's the moment of originality. And I put this here because I think you'll apprehend, as I did, the cognitive strength in this great passage, again, in the Works and Days. And context, Perses is his brother. I mean you well, Perses, you great idiot, and I will tell you. Look, badness is easy to have. You can take it by handfuls without effort. The road that way is smooth and starts here beside you. But between us and virtue, the mortals have put what will make us sweat. The road to virtue is long and goes steep uphill, hard climbing at first, but the last of it, when you get to the summit, if you get there, is easy going after the hard part. Very beautiful. And this is one of the foremost places in which Hesiod uses metaphor. It doesn't seem like Hesiod is a big fan of metaphor. He's a very literal poet who gets down and dirty with the muck of things without evading with the use of metaphor. Also, this is just so perfectly true. Badness is the default starting position of humankind, and goodness is the way forward through the phenomenological game. Now, the moment of wisdom was quite interesting because it made me reapprehend something that I'd always taken for granted. And then it also has a very nice dictum on the individual. It goes like this: "Here is the law as Zeus established it for human beings. As for fish and wild animals and the flying birds, they feed on each other, since there is no idea of justice among them. But to men he gave justice, and she in the end is proved the best thing they have. If a man sees what is right and is willing to argue it, Zeus of the wide brows grants him prosperity. But when one knowingly tells lies and swears an oath on it, when he is so wild as to do incurable damage against justice, this man is left a diminished generation hereafter, but the generation of the true sworn man grows stronger." Now, there's a quite interesting turn of phrase here when he says, when he is so wild as to do incurable damage against justice, you think the punishment is going to be in the present and immediate now. But he says, he who does incurable damage against justice, this man is left a diminished generation hereafter. How he was able to apprehend such a long-term consequence, especially back then without randomized controlled trials. Well, it's interesting. Hesiod must have been a very observant person, because I believe this to be very true as well, that the one who tells lies and twists justice, maybe he gets away with it in his lifetime, but the behaviors that he passes on cannot sustain his next generation and squanders it. But the truth teller, the one aligned perfectly with honesty, the behaviors he passes on only strengthens his generations thereafter. Now, parts worth memorizing. There was this part I was saving for this, because it also embodies an ancient pith of mankind, which is this: "It is best to do things systematically, since we are only human and disorder is our worst enemy." And the context here is he was giving a step-by-step guide on what to do, and he was advising that, always stick to a plan and don't be lazy. As we said before, the putter off of work, the putter off of work is the man who wrestles with disaster. Well, the further consolidation of that fact and the alleviation, the amelioration is, it is best to do things systematically, since we are only human and disorder is our worst enemy. That is why many great novelists, wake up in the morning and have their writing block immediately, say from 9 to 2, like Dickens, I think, or Murakami's crazy 4 a.m. run, then 5 a.m. to whatever, 8 a.m., 10 a.m. he writes, and then he's got the whole day free. You work systematically. Now, the BOW score for Hesiod, even though I really like this way more than I thought I was going to, we have to be honest. And really, what was it like reading Lattimore's translation? It was like 1 out of 5. Ugh. I could slit my throat with how disrespectful and irreverent I'm being with these canonical texts. But I guess I better learn ancient Greek to make up for all of this slandering I'm doing. And there's another lie I told. Hesiod would whip me right now. Now, the last question to force ourselves to compare two books was Hesiod's Works and Days and Theogony better than, less than, or equal to the Odyssey? Well, it was weaker, let's say that, than the Odyssey. The Odyssey is obviously much stronger, even though I think Hesiod has more wisdom in his poem, at least. Anyway, that's that. Like if you like, subscribe if you want to subscribe. I don't know, do what you have to do. We're done with this book. Next book is How I Have Waited for This. If Not Winter, Sapphire's Fragments, translated by Ann Carson. Anyway, have a good day, have a good night, have a good sleep, have a good morning. Bye.